Welcome to today's exclusive interview with Michael Fasulo, Product and Marketing Leader at Convolt, a specialist in cybersecurity, hyperscalers, and quantum technologies. Now, in this conversation, Michael shares expert insights as we dive into quantum computing, what it is, its practical applications, and the opportunities and threats it brings. He breaks down the collaborations and innovation needed to drive progress and gives us a look ahead at the future of this powerful new technology, including the threats and risks it presents. We'll also hear how Commvault is setting new standards in cybersecurity with its quantum-ready security solutions. Michael explains how Commvault is adding more quantum-safe capabilities to its platform, building strong defenses against emerging post-quantum cryptography threats. And as quantum computing moves from theory into practice, it's reshaping the cybersecurity landscape. And Michael helps us understand what it really takes to stay resilient in a digital world that's evolving fast. Let's jump in. Okay, so Michael, it's great to have you talking to us today about quantum computing and just how important it is, especially when it comes to cybersecurity. Can we start by you telling us really, what quantum computing is, defining it and how it differs from traditional computing?
Yeah, that's probably a really good place to start. So when I think about quantum computing, I think about how it leverages the principles of quantum mechanics. So it's processing data in a fundamentally different way than classical computers. So quantum machines use qubits, and these can exist in multiple states as opposed to like classical computers that uses just bits. So they're usually just zeros and ones. So that's really the difference. And because they can maintain these different states, it provides like this exponential scale of computational power. So this is, sure, I'm abbreviating it to try not to get down to the rabbit hole talking about like logic gates and things like that. But at the premise, it's really, quantum machines use qubits. Regular classical computing uses just bits that are zeros and ones. And it's worth noting that quantum machines really aren't a replacement for classical computing. Like classical computers will continue to operate adjacent to, but these quantum machines are really good at, or they excel really at calculating large factorial numbers in massive like topic spaces like simulations of molecules and chemistry and things of that nature.
Wow, that's so amazing. That's really interesting. Now, I know that you are so passionate about it because we've done calls before on this topic. Can you tell us really why you think that quantum computing has transitioned from being a future tech to something governments and businesses are investing in heavily today?
Yeah, I like how question number 2 is completely loaded, but not a problem. I'll certainly tackle it. So I think what we're seeing is like a maturing of the hardware, the software. We're seeing lots in the competitive ecosystem and even like the use cases. So I think it's hit this level of maturity that not only is it being looked at as a solution, but it's also a threat. And we're starting to see CEOs and operators of quantum companies at tech events. We're starting to see some of the bigger hyperscalers coming out with their own chips and, quantum technologies. And then, we're seeing the stocks of these companies have like these volatile swings week to week. And obviously I follow them because I'm in space. But, they're starting to get these news cycles. So I think there's a lot of things that are happening together that's really painting that picture on, why we're seeing it become more of a today state than a future state. But more importantly, like these quantum machines are solving really hard problems, right? Like, as I said before, there's certain spaces where it really works well. So with that, I think you're going to start to see like these next generation battery chemistries. Microsoft was talking about using a new cooling lubricant. So they're finding like these real applications. There's drug discoveries and even like the banks and stock market simulations are happening like today. So I think all of these things kind of together are making them a more of a today thing than they would be, for future.
And are you seeing any industries in particular being super interested in this or even disrupted, by quantum computing?
Yeah, so I think you'll start to see like from a disrupted in a good way. You'll start to see the big drug companies, banks, financial institutions all looking at quantum as an accelerator of technology and simulation. From a disruptive standpoint, industries that heavily rely on asymmetric cryptography are probably going to be the most vulnerable to quantum as a threat vector. So, I think you're going to have like these two sides of the coin, and some companies are going to be in both sides of that coin. So, really important. You'll start to see, technologists that are trying to understand, not only how it applies to their business, but how are they going to secure their environments from quantum threats. And I'm sure that there's billions and billions of devices across the world that, are going to be particularly vulnerable to these quantum machines. So, I think you're going to start to see heavy traction in people upskilling and educating to really figure out like what's really going on from not only an enabler, but also a threat vector.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I know we're going to dive into some of those aspects, certainly when it comes to cyber in a few minutes. Yep. How do you think we are going to ensure quantum computing really benefits society as a whole? I mean, you picked up on, well, you touched on the fact that it's going to affect certain sectors more than others. Yep. But what I'm kind of concerned about when it comes to quantum, aside from the cyber aspect, is whether or not it's actually going to widen the gap between those in tech, those tech leaders, and also some of the developing nations.
Yeah, so I think I got a couple opinions on that. I think because these machines are really good in the drug and chem space, I think we're going to see modern medicine really evolve to improve health, longevity, and hopefully reduce side effects. Hopefully these machines can kind of help us be a little more efficient on, not only producing world-class drugs and pharmaceuticals, but, reduce some of the, negative side effects. And if we continue kind of on that chemistry thread, I think if we, I mentioned the cooling lubricants before, things that produce less pollution and other impacts that modern technology has on society or the various ecosystems of the planet. So I think there's a lot of good that's going to come from them. And, with these things probably won't just happen with quantum machines, like there'll be classical compute and even AI adjacent to it. So if you think about those three things as a trifecta, I think we're starting to set up kind of the tech stack in a way that's going to allow us to drive these, next generation capabilities to better all of society. Now, you mentioned like developing nations. I think of quantum from kind of two facets. I think the accessibility standpoint, when we look at, what the hyperscalers are doing with having interest in quantum, not only as an application, but also from a hosting standpoint. I took some training through IBM and I have quantum hours that I can have, and I didn't pay a dime for it. So, quantum machines will be accessible. And I think as the hyperscalers get quantum machines, it'll provide that next level accessibility to them. So I think on a global stage, that's really important from an accessibility standpoint. IBM also has open sourced a lot of their dev kits. And there's plenty of free education, just like I took. So I think there's a lot of free resources. But, when I look at the developing nations, even the benefits, I think they're going to be the best receiver of quantum technologies. And, not just talking about the pharmaceuticals and things that we had just mentioned, but even thinking about how food is grown or crops and soil remediation and other things like that, even, shipping things to these nations. I think these quantum computers are going to solve a lot of those problems too. So I think developing nations are going to be a good receiver of a lot of the benefits that we get from quantum technology.
I think that's such a good take on it. I really do, because, certainly, like I said a few minutes ago, I'm concerned about, how it's going to widen the gap, but actually looking at it from that benefit perspective, that receiving perspective, there's so much good that quantum computing can bring. Now, I want to touch on the cyber aspect, because that's where it gets almost it gets dangerous. That's where the big threat is. And obviously, like, I'm in cyber, you're in cyber. We see these things so much more than others. There's this saying out there: harvest now, decrypt later. Yep. What exactly does this mean? What is going on with that?
Yeah. So I think that's the attack vector that all of us in tech are kind of focusing on. And really what that means is, threat vectors are coming in, there's a breach, and they're exfiltrating the data in hopes that they can decrypt it later. Now, Again, I have access to a quantum machine hours through IBM, but, at the same time, it's like I'm not going to be able to use it in a nefarious way. But again, in hopes that, maybe nation state actors that are finding data to steal, they would be able to decrypt it later. So for companies that have like really long-lived, highly sensitive data, this would be like trade secrets, drug recipes, stuff like that. Biometric data would be another good example. That data is highly sensitive, and it needs to stay sensitive for a really, really long time. So not all data is treated equal, but in this particular case, you're going to want to, further secure this type of data. And an opposite example would be like a credit card number, right? Like if your credit card number is breached, it's just like, okay, kill that thing, get a new one, and away you go. So, treating data, understanding your data and treating it separately is super, super important. So, when I talk to our customers, I always advise them, like, if you have this type of data, we need to start to have that quantum threat conversation.
Absolutely. That was my next question, actually. Do you think that businesses are actually taking it seriously right now? I mean, I know you said you're having a lot of conversations, but certainly from where I'm sitting, I'm not seeing enough conversations about quantum computing when it comes to cyber.
Yeah, so I probably have a different perspective because I'm one of the few cyber folks here at Commvault that talk about quantum. So of course I'm the primary focus. But here's what I could tell you. In the last month or so, I've been to 3 different conferences, hyperscalers and just a general CISO conference. And I can tell you that the amount of quantum sessions, the amount of data that's getting disposed of at these events is just increasing exponentially. And for the last event that I went to, there was like a super deep quantum course, and it was absolutely packed that I couldn't even get in. And I was upset about that, but it's really showing that there's a lot of interest in this particular space. And a lot of these post conversations, although they're revolving around harvest now, decrypt later, we're starting to see some of the other threat vectors being discussed as part of that particular journey. So, I've been at Convolt for, over 22 years. And in the last 21 years, quantum really wasn't a thing, but in the last year, it's really picked up. So, my view of the world is it's getting the traction, and, we're really happy to have those deep conversations and make sure that we can protect our customers' data from, all these evolving threats, whether they exist today or tomorrow.
So how long is it going to be before, we are actually developing these quantum resistant cryptography?
We're already there. So NIST did a really amazing job. And I think what they've done is they really understand the severity of quantum to cryptography. And, when we're talking about cryptography, we're talking asymmetric cryptography more than symmetric. Asymmetric cryptography is really the one that's vulnerable here. So NIST back in 2016, went to the world stage and asked for, cryptography experts, mathematicians, PhDs, all these brilliant people. And they figured out that this threat is real. And they started down the path of creating these algorithms. So from 2016 to today, they've established a bunch of lattice-based algorithms to protect asymmetric cryptography. So post-quantum cryptography protection is available today. And, as of recently, they even have a backup one so that if someone was able to crack the mathematics that are behind these algorithms, there's a backup one just in case. So, NIST and these experts are really doing an amazing job of putting these out there, not only to protect the data today, but in the event that these were cracked, there's already a backup in place. So, this crypto agility mindset is super, super important as the space evolves, because we just don't know how it's going to evolve. We know that it will, and we have the safeguards kind of available today. So it's
that's really good news. But what about the challenges? What challenges actually remain today? Because we're moving ahead. Some companies more than others. We're certainly addressing it. But what about the challenges that still remain?
Yeah, I think there's still like there's an educational gap, and there's lots of attack vectors. So there's plenty of work to be done. But, as this space evolves, it's really important to understand and kind of cut through some of the hype and things that we're seeing out in space. So I think, for companies that do have this threat today, they certainly have a little bit of runway, but they should certainly take advantage of it. And if they have other legacy systems and other things, like that's going to make it exponentially harder to figure out how they're going to safeguard their data and safeguard their infrastructure. So I think there's certainly a skilling standpoint that needs to get done. And I'm not saying or advocating that people need to have PhDs and things to, get that level of understanding or, on quantum mechanics. But at the same time, they should understand how it impacts cryptography, because this is kind of like the lifeblood of our systems, right? Like without cryptography, a lot of these unsecured things can cause massive, massive damage. So, super important that we start to upskill and then, apply these controls and things the right way. And, not every customer completely understands their data silos and their data footprint. So, even understanding their data footprint is also super important. So I think the combination of what do I have, how sensitive is it, how long is it going to be sensitive, and then having the necessary skills and folks internally to, safeguard these things is super important.
I think it really brings the problem that we have in cyber home, doesn't it? Because it's scaling, along with AI, it's just scaling everything. It's almost like it's thrusting it out there. If you don't sort this now, you're going to have huge problems. So now really is the time to really start to address this and understand, your data footprint, what assets you have, and so on. And
I was going to say just, from a timing perspective, like World According to Fasulo, I would say in 3 to 5 years, you're going to start to see this being a big problem. And that's why I'm saying with the traction that we're seeing in the space, the investments that we're seeing, and some of the hype is also kind of accelerating this thing, just like AI was. So, when I look at the space holistically, you got these AI benefits and threats, and then you have these quantum benefits and threats. So the space that we're in, I think is pretty unprecedented. So really important that folks kind of look at the landscape, look at how it applies to their own business, whether it's agentic or quantum, and figure out what's the best foot forward to, protect the estate accordingly.
And I want to ask you about collaboration and innovation. How important do you think it is for this to occur between governments, private companies and academia in terms of advancing quantum computing and ensuring its secure implementation?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely critical, right? And, this space being hugely complex, there's lots of nomenclature, there's shared airtime with AI, which is also, again, another set of risks. I think it's super important that we start to see governments, private companies, academia kind of contributing to make sure that, everyone's kind of moving in unison. Like I said, precision is super important in some of these conversations to understand, it's not every single type of cryptography is exposed. So I think there's a lot of nuance that's super important. And I think as we start to see not only the language settle on some of these things and the math and the physics behind them, but also we're starting to see governmental standards and global standards, talking about PQC as a requirement for compliance. So you're starting to see all these things kind of converge. And I think it's super important that happens so that everyone can really be safeguards from the threats of today and tomorrow.
So looking at things right now, what steps should organizations be taking right now to prepare for the potential cybersecurity risks that you've just kind of gone through with us posed by quantum computing?
Yeah, so I think, what I was saying before about kind of surveying your data, I think it's really important that folks really take a survey of their data, understand, what cryptographic technologies they're using. Can they increase the key lengths? Those are some immediate things you can do. For your symmetric encryption, you could absolutely be using AES 256. It's still very quantum safe from today's standards with today's algorithms and things. But, when we look at RSA, being at 2048, even increasing that will give you a little bit. So, really take that survey, understand what they are, and increase those things. Now, for a lot of customers that I talk to, they don't even know what their data footprint looks like or what needs to be long-term. So, we have deep capabilities within our product that allows us to do deep data discovery and classification of that data. So we could all find the PHI, and we allow folks to kind of have custom identifiers. So if they have something, really unique to their business, but it is, classified as very sensitive, we give them those tools. So then they can kind of do that survey. And then, as I mentioned before, we have post-quantum cryptography protection within our product. They can enable that pretty seamlessly with a checkbox and, a group configuration. So we provide both of those capabilities, and that's kind of the landing spot for most of my conversations with our customers. And because PQC is built into our platform, we offer it free of charge for our customers. So it's free to use PQC to protect your data, especially since it's super long-term and sensitive. So, that's kind of how we've approached the quantum threat landscape. It's discover what you need, apply it to the machines that have this super sensitive data now that you understand where it is and how long it's going to live, and then do it for free through our platform. So.
That's amazing, because that was my next question. It was literally, how's Convolt addressing challenges?
Yeah. So and we get that question a lot. And look, our pledge to our customers is always to safeguard their data. I mean, that's job zero for us. So whether we're using traditional methods or PQC, like these things are threats for our most sensitive customers, and we take it we don't take it lightly. So when we set out a year ago and built our crypto agilic framework, we knew that this was going to be an evolving space. We started having those conversations, and we took the plunge, kind of had first mover advantage there. And then as the space evolved and as the conversations evolved, we realized that this is something that we're going to have to consistently do as the threat landscape evolves. And we all know that the threat landscape evolves very quickly. Mm-hmm. So, we put all the hard work in initially, and now we continue to leverage NIST and some of the other experts in the space to make sure that we're applying these algorithms as necessary. And even with the backup one being in draft, we do have the capability to do it because we may need to turn it on at any given point. So, really important that, we continue to listen to customers, experts in the space. We continue to skill up internally. We participate in research, and, we want to make sure that whether we understand how these threats are going to evolve or not, we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to keep our customers' data safe.
That's amazing. That's so reassuring. Thank you for that. Have you got any last bits of advice that you would give businesses and even cybersecurity professionals who are just starting to think about quantum computing?
Yeah, I would say, really take the advantages and the threats equally as serious as you can. And apply it to your business accordingly. I know, we talked about Harvest Now, Decrypt Later as kind of that main vector, and I think that's probably the one that people are most concerned. But there's plenty of other threat vectors looming with quantum, because asymmetric cryptography is used literally everywhere. So, and with that said, like, that requires people, it requires skills, it requires software, it requires research. So I would say, my advice would be to everyone to really start to have those conversations. And if you don't know, reach out to folks on LinkedIn. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I can provide you a whole bunch of resources and things to, start that journey. But just know that, if you're an existing Convolt customer, we have your back, and we have the capabilities today, and we will have the capabilities to continue to evolve tomorrow as, we're taking this threat as seriously as we could, amongst all the other threats that we're protecting our customers' data from.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for that. Thank you for sharing all the valuable insights that you have done today. You've certainly you've opened my eyes to the threats and also the opportunities. You've reassured me. I'm sure you've reassured a lot of viewers who are tuning in to watch this episode. Quantum computing, it is here now. You've got to get ahead of it. There are cybersecurity risks coming. Again, you've got to get ahead of those, but certainly with Convolt, and your guidance, customers certainly would be in the best place for that. So once again, thanks, Michael. To learn more about quantum computing, you said, very gracefully that people could connect with you. Is LinkedIn the best place to connect with you?
Absolutely. So, feel free to just make a connection, send me a message, and I'll be happy to help.
Amazing. That's really good. And to go and learn more about Convolt solutions, I'm going to put a link around this video. And I encourage you to go and check those out now. Have a conversation with Michael or the Convolt team.
Stay safe. Have a great day.
This is out. What I say is stay safe, stay informed, and keep evolving your defenses.
That's right. Awesome.